welcome to Jurassic Quest Tour. And also, welcome to my son's room. Special thanks to my son for letting me use his room for this video. Now, why do I like to use my son's room for these videos? Couple reasons. First of all, I love all the cool things he has on these shelves. These are some really awesome toys. In fact, some of them were my toys when I was younger, and I just passed them on to him. But the other reason I like it are the shelves themselves. You see, each one of these cubes on these shelves are 1 foot by 1 foot, which we call 1 foot square. And that way, if I'm talking about the size of a dinosaur, you have an immediate size comparison. For instance, if I said a dinosaur is 6 foot long, that would be the entire length of this shelf. If I said it was 6 foot tall, that would be the entire height of this shelf. So you can kind of get an idea of how big these animals actually were. Now, which dinosaur do you guys want to start with? Just as I thought, Tyrannosaurus Rex. Yeah, that's everybody's favorite dinosaur. In fact, raise your hand if T-Rex is your favorite dinosaur. That's a lot of you. Well, I've got a little piece of information for you guys. It turns out your favorite dinosaur eats my favorite dinosaur. Yeah, my favorite dinosaur is Triceratops. Now, T-Rex is an amazing dinosaur, and we know you love it, and that's why when you come into the Jurassic Quest Tour, one of the first things you see is our giant T-Rex. Now, T-Rex is a very big dinosaur, and he is a carnivore or meat-eating dinosaur. And if you wanted to, they brought a T-Rex back to life somehow, and you wanted to avoid being eaten by it, you might take the advice you heard in a movie where they said, if you don't move, Tyrannosaurus Rex can't see you. That is most likely terrible advice. See, T-Rex actually had really good eyesight. And if you look at this toy here, you'll see that his eyes actually face forward, which means he has what we call binocular vision, which means he has depth perception, everything a hunting animal would want to have. The other problem with that scene is there are two people standing in front of a T-Rex's head, and they're like, here, I've got a T-Rex head right here. And the two people are like, all right, if you don't move, he won't be able to see you. The problem is, T-Rex also had an amazing sense of smell. So he just would have been like, chomp, and that would have been the end of those two people. Now, T-Rex lived towards the end time of the dinosaurs. He lived about 66 million years ago. And that's the last of the non-avian dinosaurs. Now, wait, non-avian dinosaurs? What does that mean? Well, avian means bird, so really what it means is not bird dinosaur. Because you may not know this, every bird you see is technically a dinosaur. In fact, there are only 3 differences between a dinosaur and a modern-day bird. Teeth in the beak. Modern-day birds don't tend to have teeth in their beaks. Claws on their wings. Modern-day birds don't typically have claws on their wings. And then more vertebrae in their tail, so they have a longer tail. And that's pretty much the only difference. So if you see a penguin, you're seeing a dinosaur. If you see a little robin out in your yard, you're also looking at a dinosaur. Well, T-Rex was an especially large dinosaur. T-Rex was about 42 feet long, maybe even longer. So that's 42 of these cubes. And he was about 12 and a half, 13 feet tall at the hip. Now, this is 6. To get to 12, you would need another one stacked on top of this, and then yet maybe another half or a full one on top of that. And that's just at the hip. Now, seems weird to measure something at the hip, doesn't it? Well, it's not that strange. You see, the way that dinosaurs stand, the hip tends to be one of the highest portions that stays constant. So they say 13 feet at the hip. So this is how tall he was right here. Now his head might have reared back and got him a little bit taller at certain times, or a little bit lower at certain times. You can't really tell where the head's going to be, but you always know where that hip's going to be. And that's why we typically measure dinosaurs at the hip. T-Rex was also a big dinosaur. I've heard weight estimates anywhere from 6 tons to 9 tons. That's pretty much elephant size. The African elephant, the largest animal on land we have today, weighed about the same as a T-Rex, maybe a little bit less than a T-Rex. So these are really big, powerful animals. And one of the most powerful things about them is their bite force. Oh my goodness, they've got a really amazing bite force. In fact, we think the best of any land animal, and any dinosaur for sure. And I've heard estimates between 8,000 pounds per square inch and 12,000 pounds per square inch. So a whole lot. Ouch, that's a mighty tough bite. Now, T-Rex is also one of the, talking about his great sense of smell. He had a lot of those teeth to help handle that bite force. Now, those teeth, here I've got actually one right here. This tooth right here is a T-Rex tooth. And if we hold it up to one of these squares, you can see it's almost a foot long itself. Now, but a lot of this is root. All you're really going to see sticking out of the gum line is about that much of the tooth. All the rest of this is to anchor that tooth in place, because he needs all that anchor to handle that kind of bite force that he has going on. All right, well, that's been a little bit about T-Rex. Let's take a look at our next dinosaur. Well, here we are at the next dinosaur, and this dinosaur is my favorite dinosaur. It's Triceratops. Now, Triceratops lived at the same time and same place as Tyrannosaurus Rex. That would be about 68 to 66 million years ago in North America, a little bit up into Canada. Now, we know that these two lived together because we have some kind of gross evidence of that. You see, there's a thing called coprolite. And coprolite, how do I describe this, is fossilized excrement or poop. And we have actually found fossilized T-Rex coprolite. But inside that coprolite, we found little bone fragments of Triceratops. So T-Rex was definitely eating my favorite dinosaur. Now, Triceratops is a really cool dinosaur. He's what we call a ceratopsian or horn-faced dinosaur. In fact, Triceratops means 3 horns on the face, because he had the 2 prominent eye horns and then a nose horn as well. Now, Triceratops is an herbivore or plant-eating dinosaur, and he most likely ate tough brush and fern-like plants that are towards the ground, not quite always maybe on the ground, but a little bit raised. His head only had so much motion, so he probably definitely wasn't going up for anything in the trees. There's no way a Triceratops is going to climb a tree. He's just not built for it. So he's eating lower vegetation. Now, Triceratops is famous for his horns and his big frill. And people always want to know, what's that horn and frill stuff all about? Well, most likely it was to impress the ladies. Yeah, you see, some animals grow ridiculously enlarged features to impress the ladies. I don't know why anyone would grow something ridiculously long to impress ladies, but sometimes people do. And Triceratops' frill was most likely probably for that. Now, he's one of the few ceratopsian dinosaurs that has a solid frill. A lot of the other ceratopsian dinosaurs have big holes in the frill, which means the frill isn't very good for defense, but it's really good for display. Triceratops' skull was probably good for both. So paleontologists believe it might have been brightly colored, but we can't be sure about that. The horns were also probably for mostly display, but then again, being horns, they're also good for attacking or maybe defending yourself with them. So we have found evidence that Triceratopses would battle with one another because we found scratch marks on the frill where their horns would have been rubbing against the frill. And those scratch marks are consistent with the horns rubbing against each other as they're pushing and trying to be dominant in the group. But there are a lot of unanswered questions. Now, Triceratops is one of the largest ceratopsian dinosaurs. I've heard estimates between 24 to 30 feet long. To give you an idea, like I said, this is 6 feet long. So if we had 4 of those, that'd be 24 feet long. If we had 5, that'd be 30 feet long. So he's 4 to 5 of these in length. And he's probably about 9 feet tall. So this one stands 6 feet, add another 3 on top of that. And that's about how tall a Triceratops is at the hip once again. So with a Triceratops, we're actually going to measure him right there. Now, Triceratops eats plants, but he needs specialized teeth to do that. In fact, the tough plants that he's eating, he also needs that little beak on his face to do so as well. You'll see here he's got that little beak on his face, so that beak helps to break off the plant material, get it into his mouth. But then he's got to chew it up. And how many teeth did a Triceratops have in his head? Way more than a T-Rex. Triceratops had a whole bunch of smaller teeth. He had 4 rows that go along each side, 2 on the top, 2 on the sides and the lower. And he would have about 40 in each of those rows, so that's 160 teeth showing. But he could have rows above that, maybe up to 4 rows above that. So at any given time in his head, he might have up to 800 teeth in his head. That's a lot of teeth. All right, it's about time to go and take a look at our next dinosaur. Next dinosaur is Spinosaurus. And what a dinosaur it is. Spinosaurus, or Spinosaurus aegypticus as we call it, is one of the largest carnivores or meat-eating dinosaurs that's ever been around. He's definitely the longest at 50 feet long. 50 feet, how much is that? Well, these shelves barely do anything to tell you. They're 6 feet long, like I said, so times 8 would be 48 feet plus 2 more, so these shelves would go on forever for this guy. He's really big. Now, Spinosaurus, we don't know a whole lot about this animal, and the reason is we don't have a whole lot of remains from this animal. We don't have a whole lot of his bones, and that's how we learn about dinosaurs. Now, the best skeletal pieces we ever had of Spinosaurus were in a museum in Germany, but during World War II, the British bombed that section of Germany, and the museum and all the dinosaurs' bones inside it were lost. All we have left of those now are photographs. So, how do we learn about Spinosaurus if we don't have very many of his bones? Well, recently they found a few more bones on the Moroccan black market. They actually found a few more bones, traced them down, found out they were definitely Spinosaurus, and then they compared those bones to the old bones, and then they started comparing them to other dinosaurs like Suchomimus or Baryonyx, which are also in the Spinosaur family. And that's how we get an idea of what Spinosaur actually looked like. But our view of what he looked like has changed a lot. When I was a little kid, that's what they thought Spinosaurus looked like. A very rounded sail on his back and pretty much just a T-Rex head or standard theropod head on his body. And then standing up like a kangaroo. But that's not what we think he looks like now. Now we definitely think that he's more, well, I don't have a Spinosaurus toy to show you, but I do have a Baryonyx that I've altered. So, here's a Baryonyx that I've put a little spine on. Now his legs should be a little bit shorter for a Spinosaurus. But you'll see that once again, he's kind of actually more parallel. His tail is not on the ground. And now just recently they found out that that tail probably has a small sail on it as well and is really good for moving back and forth and making it better at swimming. So we didn't know for sure if this dinosaur was in the water a whole lot or not. One of the reasons we didn't know, we didn't have much of his the feet and everything, but now we found some foot claws, and they tend to be very flat and wide on the bottom, and that's good for like walking on soft marshy ground and not sinking in, or it's also really good for swimming. And the tail is going to be really good for swimming. Also, his head is very much like that of a crocodile. He's got the nose kind of high up, and the eyes are high up, and that allows him to kind of float in the water and see right above the water. So that is a head that is definitely designed for being in the water. Also, we know that he's a special kind of carnivore, a thing we call a piscivore, which is a fish-eating animal primarily. So a lot of his relatives were piscivores, definitely eating fish. So we think he also ate fish. Now, Spinosaurus, when he's eating those fish, he's got teeth designed for it, the kind of spearing teeth. T-Rex has teeth designed for crushing bone. A dinosaur like Allosaurus has slicing teeth, but his teeth are more for spearing. And then he's got that little rounded end at his nose. And that little gap there is also really good about catching and holding on to big slippery fish. Now, he lived a long time ago. He lived over in Egypt, and he lived about 112 to maybe 93 million years ago. So people always ask, who would win in a fight, Tyrannosaurus Rex or Spinosaurus? Well, they'd never get a chance to fight. T-Rex is living 66 million years ago in North America. Spinosaurus is living 99 million years ago in Africa. They're never going to see each other. But if they did fight, even though the movie had Spinosaurus winning, most paleontologists don't think so. Like I said, Spinosaurus' teeth were designed for catching and holding onto fish. T-Rex's teeth, as we discussed earlier, were designed for crushing bone. So, T-Rex would probably definitely win that matchup. All right, let's get on and take a look at our next dinosaur. Next, we're gonna look at, whoa, look at those long necks. That must be a Apatosaurus. Now, if you looked at these guys and you wanted to call them Brontosaurus, that's totally understandable. You see, Brontosaurus is one of the most famous, beloved dinosaurs we've ever discovered. But for a while, we didn't actually think Brontosaurus was a valid dinosaur. No, we thought it was the body of an Apatosaurus, and it definitely did. They just put the head of a Camarasaurus on it. But now it turns out, after some studies in 2015, paleontologists actually believe that the two are separate species again. So it's not a Brontosaurus excelsus or not an Apatosaurus excelsus, it's a Brontosaurus. Now, Apatosaurus lived in the Jurassic. He lived about 153 to 151 million years ago. Now, all the other dinosaurs you saw so far lived in the Cretaceous, which is the last period for the dinosaurs. But the Jurassic is right there in the middle. The periods for dinosaurs go Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. And all of those fit in an era called the Mesozoic. Now, Apatosaurus was a really cool dinosaur and a really big dinosaur. He might have been around 70 to maybe up to 90 feet long. He was really large. And he could have weighed somewhere around 30 tons. That's really, really big. Now, as far as how tall he was at the hip, remember we measured dinosaurs at the hip. Well, like I said, this is 6 foot. He was about 15 feet at the hip. So we need another 6 foot on top of that to get to 12, and then another 3 on top of that to get to 15. So he's way up there. And if he lifted his neck up, he was up way even higher. Now, they do have these giant long necks. Why? Well, the dinosaurs that you see with the giant long necks are what we call sauropods. And sauropods, that long neck, most likely served a purpose to help them get more food into their body with less movement. Also, they might have been eating specialized things like leaves and things from trees way up. So that neck, if the sauropod neck is pointing straight up, almost definitely they're chewing on trees. In the Apatosaurus, he's got a little more movement in there, so he can go from trees to like middle vegetation, maybe even lower vegetation. So he's got a wider variety. Some sauropods seem to be designed more for on the ground. Now, when you're that big and you've got to take in that much food, you don't have time to chew a whole bunch of food. No, what you have to do is just swallow it and get it in there as fast as you possibly can. And that long neck actually helps. If you're eating something from the ground, that means you can just take a whole big semicircle of food, take a step forward, and get a whole new, brand new step of food. So not much movement to use energy, but a lot of food coming in. And sauropod teeth were not actually used for chewing. Sauropod teeth were used for just raking food up and getting it into their mouth. Well then, how do they break the food down? Well, sauropods, they think, actually might have swallowed small stones called gastroliths. And these little stones they would swallow, and then they have a second stomach that helps mash those things together. It's a very muscular form, and it would just mash those stones against the food, and that helps to break down the food. Also, they had really big guts, so they have a long digestive tract to handle that food. Now, they've got a long neck, but they've also got a long tail. What's that tail for? Well, if you've got a long neck like that, you do need a counterbalance on the other end. So the tail definitely could be used as a counterbalance and kind of keep them all even. But it also can move back and forth, and it could have been used as a whip to defend themselves. So if a problem comes along, they can whip it good. So these guys are using these whips to defend themselves. Some paleontologists take it a step further. They think not only could they use these tails as a whip, some of them might have actually been able to snap that whip and make a loud booming sound to scare away predators. All right, these guys are pretty amazing, but let's go take a look at our next dinosaur. The next dinosaur? Oh, wow, this guy's famous. He's actually been in a movie. Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember the scene or not, so I will act it out for you. It's Dilophosaurus, and Dilophosaurus in the movie spreads out his neck frills. He spits poison right in Newman's face. Newman manages to scramble up into his Jeep. Dilophosaurus hops into the passenger seat of the Jeep and attacks him. Well, there are several problems with the way I've just described that scene. First of all, the character's name was not Newman. That's just a joke I threw in for your parents. No. The first problem is no dinosaur ever has been shown to have neck frills. They just don't exist in the dinosaur kingdom. The next problem, well, is the actual size of a Dilophosaurus. You see, in the movie, they have his head down about this height, about 3 feet or so. But in actuality, his head would probably be right up around here. And his length might have been 18 feet plus. They're 6 feet long. I would need 2 more of these shelving units on the other end to make it as long as this guy. So he definitely doesn't fit in the passenger seat of a Jeep. The other problem is this dinosaur never spit poison or acid or venom or anything of that nature. Now, how do we know this? Well, take a look at the size of his claws on his feet and the size of the claws on his hands and his mouth, which just happens to be filled with small steak knives. There is no reason for this dinosaur to need poison. This dinosaur is an amazing dinosaur. Now, like Apatosaurus, he lived in the Jurassic period, the Middle Age, but he lived much earlier. He lived about 193 million years ago, so it's towards the beginning of the Jurassic. Now, he does have those 2 crests on his head. In fact, his name means double-crested lizard. Now, what were those things used for? Well, when we find them, they're not very strong, so he's probably not banging them around or anything. They're probably just for a display. So apparently that's what Lady Dilophosaurus is like, is these two big crests. All right, let's go and take a look at our next dinosaur. Next, we're going to take a look at this brightly colored guy here. This is Qianzhousaurus. And no, this is not what happens when you feed a dinosaur Skittles. Qianzhousaurus is a tyrannosaur from China. But take a look at that nose. It's very long and narrow, and we're not sure why. Now, he's closely related to another tyrannosaur called Alioramus from Mongolia, and both of them have that very long, narrow nose. Now, there are a lot of dinosaurs with long, narrow noses, like Spinosaurus, Suchomimus, Baryonyx, Irritator, but all of those are thought to be piscivores, or fish-eating animals. And they think that the long, narrow nose helps to cut through the water with less resistance than a broad nose would cut through the water, making them faster, more accurate fishermen. So perhaps Qianzhousaurus was supplementing his diet with fish. Or perhaps he was hunting for smaller, faster prey, and he didn't need the powerful bite of a T-Rex. He needed a longer, narrower, more accurate nose to catch those those smaller, faster animals. Honestly, we really don't know. This dinosaur was only discovered in 2014, so there's still a lot of unanswered questions about him. But I can tell you this much, in the United States, we do not typically refer to this dinosaur as Qianzhousaurus in the United States because he's a tyrannosaur with a very long nose. We typically just call him Pinocchio Rex. How big was he? Probably about 21 feet long. Using my shelves again, this is 6 feet, so we're going to need about 3.5 of these just to be as long as he was. All right, let's go take a look at the next dinosaur. The next dinosaur we're going to talk about is Carnotaurus. Whoa, look at that guy. That is a crazy looking theropod. Oh, theropods are pretty much any meat-eating dinosaur that you know of. They all fall into the theropod family. But look at that guy. He's got these crazy horns on his head, and he's a meat-eater. In fact, that's probably where he gets his name, which is Carnotaurus, which means meat-eating bull. Now, he lived in the late Cretaceous, about 72 to 69 million years ago. And he was actually in South America, in a place called Argentina. And that's where we actually found him. Now, he was a pretty big guy. He was probably between 25 and 30 feet long. So, well, if this is 6 feet long, 5 of these in length would be 30 feet. And so probably somewhere between 4 and 5 of these shelves long is how big Carnotaurus was. And he was probably about 8 feet tall at the hip, which means his hip, when this is 6 feet, so another 2 feet, so way up here. He's a big guy. Probably also weighed about 1.5 tons. That's 3,000 pounds. That's a really big dinosaur. Now, he has some really distinctive horns above his head. We're not sure what those horns were used for. Now, when they found him, they were thick and robust, but they were also worn out, which means he could have actually been like using them for something. He's like either grinding against other males for competition, or even heard theories that he might have headbutted his prey to knock him over and then attack them while they're on the ground. He's actually one of the fastest theropods that we know of, as far as the larger theropods. Now, the really fastest are going to be like the Ornithomimus or the Gallimimus. Those are the fastest ones. But he was actually pretty quick as well. Now, he has a rather distinctive feature. His arms are some of the smallest of any theropod. You know, T-Rex is common for like having the tiny little arms, but this guy's arms were even smaller. We have no idea what possible use they could have served. But I've heard one paleontologist say that they might have been used as a display. because they move, they're tiny, but they can move kind of outwards. And if they were brightly colored, it could have been some display for the ladies. And please let that be the case, because I really just want to imagine a little Carnotaurus be like, hey ladies, check out my tiny arms. I got little tiny arms, ladies. And the ladies are like, oh, look, he's got tiny little arms. All right, guys, I hope you've had a great time on the tour learning about these dinosaurs. This is just a few of the dinosaurs we have here at Jurassic Quest. So when we come to your town the next time, come out and see them all, and I'll tell you all about them. I bet right now, Prehistoric Nick has got some trivia questions that you guys can answer, especially if you've been listening to this tour. All right, guys, have fun with Prehistoric Nick.